Welcome to my channel, a lead that bring your story about the love of a mafia boss. Now let's listen.
The silver tray trembled in my hands as I approached table 9. My feet ached after 8 hours of standing, and the small of my back throbbed with a dull pain that had become my constant companion since entering the 5th month of pregnancy. The weight of exhaustion pressed down on my shoulders, but I couldn't afford to lose this job. Not now, not when I had another life depending on me. Table 9, 2 filet mignons, medium rare, whispered Paolo, the head waiter at Bellucci's, the most exclusive Italian restaurant in the city. His eyes swept over my uniform, lingering a second too long on my swollen belly. Try not to make a spectacle of yourself tonight, Elena. Mr. Moretti doesn't like his staff to be distracting. I nodded silently, keeping my eyes down as I'd learned to do since taking this job 3 weeks ago. Mr. Moretti, the owner, had only hired me as a favor to my aunt who had cleaned his houses for years. He'd made it clear that a visibly pregnant waitress wasn't the image Bellucci's wanted to project, but had reluctantly stationed me in the private dining section, away from the regular clientele. The private section was reserved for special guests, people with money and influence who didn't want to be seen by the general public. People like the ones occupying table 9 tonight, hidden behind the heavy velvet curtain in the corner booth. All I knew was that the reservation had been made under the name Ricci, and that the staff had been instructed to provide impeccable service without making eye contact. I balanced the tray carefully as I navigated between tables, the soles of my worn-out shoes sliding slightly against the polished marble floor. The scent of sizzling steak and truffle butter filled my nostrils, making my stomach growl. I hadn't eaten since the small sandwich I'd managed during my 15-minute break 5 hours ago. Remember, don't look up. Don't speak unless spoken to, I whispered to myself as I approached the curtain. Another waiter emerged, holding the fabric aside for me to enter. Thank you, I murmured, focusing on keeping the tray steady. The private booth was dimly lit, bathed in the amber glow of a single Art Deco lamp. I could make out the silhouettes of 2 people, seated across from each other at the table, a man and a woman. The woman's laughter, high-pitched and artificial, stopped abruptly as I entered. Your filet mignon, I announced softly, eyes trained on the tray, as I carefully set it down on the serving stand beside the table. That's when I caught his scent, sandalwood and something darker, something familiar that sent a jolt of electricity down my spine. My hands froze midair as memories crashed over me like a wave. That cologne. I would know it anywhere. 5 years of running, of hiding, of rebuilding my life piece by broken piece. And now here he was, just inches away. My heart hammered against my ribs as I fought the urge to look up, to confirm what I already knew in the marrow of my bones. Is there a problem? The woman's voice cut through my panic, sharp as a blade. I forced my hands to move, to transfer the plates from the tray to the table. No, ma'am. I apologize. The wine, came a low voice, smooth and controlled, but I could hear the tension beneath it. His voice, Dante's voice. We ordered the 82 Brunello. I made the mistake then, the one error I couldn't afford. I looked up. Dark eyes, almost black in the dim light, bored into mine. His face was exactly as I remembered it, perhaps with a few more lines at the corners of his eyes, but still devastatingly handsome. The sharp jawline, the full lips now pressed into a hard line, the slicked-back midnight hair with just a touch of silver at the temples. Dante Ricci, the man I'd fled from 5 years ago, leaving nothing but a hastily written note, and the wedding ring he'd placed on my finger. Time seemed to stop as recognition dawned in his eyes, followed swiftly by disbelief, and then something darker as his gaze dropped to my pregnant belly. Sir? I managed to whisper, my voice barely audible. His companion, a stunning blonde with crimson lips and a dress that probably cost more than I made in 3 months, looked between us with growing irritation. Do you 2 know each other? She demanded, perfectly manicured nails drumming against the table. Dante didn't answer her. He didn't even look at her. His eyes remained fixed on me, on my stomach, his expression unreadable. Then, with deliberate slowness, he reached for his wine glass, took a sip, and set it back down. No, he said finally, his voice like ice. The waitress made a mistake. Bring the wine, then leave us. I nodded. unable to speak, and backed away, nearly colliding with the curtain in my haste to escape. Once outside, I pressed my back against the wall, struggling to breathe as black spots danced at the edges of my vision. "Elena?" Paolo appeared at my side, concern etched across his features. "What's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." A ghost. If only it were that simple. Dante Ricci wasn't a ghost. He was far more dangerous than that. He was the head of one of the city's most powerful crime families, a man who commanded loyalty through fear and respect in equal measure. A man who had once loved me with a possessiveness that had both thrilled and terrified me. A man who never forgot a betrayal, and I had betrayed him in the worst possible way. I need a minute," I stammered, pressing a hand against my churning stomach. Paolo's eyes narrowed. "You know who that is in there, don't you?" When I didn't answer, he gripped my arm. "Listen to me, Elena. Whatever history you have with Mr. Ricci, forget it. He's not the kind of man you want to cross. Just bring the wine and stay out of his way for the rest of the night." I nodded mechanically, but as I moved toward the wine cellar, I knew it was already too late. The moment our eyes had met, my carefully constructed new life had begun to unravel. Dante had found me, and judging by the cold fury in his eyes when he'd looked at my pregnant belly, he had already jumped to conclusions, the wrong conclusions. With trembling hands, I retrieved the bottle of Brunello from the temperature-controlled case. $200 for a single bottle, more than my monthly rent. As I carried it back to table 9, I tried to steady my breathing, to formulate a plan. I could leave right now, walk out the back door, disappear again. But where would I go? I had barely enough money to make it through the month, let alone start over somewhere new. And with the baby coming, when I returned to the booth, Dante was alone. The blonde was nowhere to be seen. "Sir, your wine," I said, keeping my voice as steady as possible as I presented the bottle for his inspection. "Would you like me to pour?" He studied the label, then nodded once. I uncorked the bottle, fighting to keep my hands from shaking as I poured a small amount into his glass. He didn't taste it, just motioned for me to fill the glass. "Where is your companion?" I asked, immediately regretting the question. His eyes flicked up to mine, dark and dangerous. "She had a sudden headache. Sit down, Elena." It wasn't a request, it was an order, delivered in the same quiet, authoritative tone that had always made his men jump to attention. I hesitated, glancing toward the curtain. "No one will disturb us," he said, reading my thoughts as he had always been able to do. "Paolo knows better than to interrupt me when I've asked for privacy, of course. Paolo would never risk offending one of the restaurant's most important patrons. I was on my own." Slowly, I lowered myself into the seat across from him, acutely aware of how ridiculous I must look in my black and white uniform, my swollen belly pressing against the edge of the table. Dante watched me with an unsettling intensity, his fingers idly turning the stem of his wine glass. 5 years, he said finally, his voice deceptively soft. 5 years without a word, and now I find you here, serving me dinner, carrying another man's child. I flinched at the barely contained rage beneath his calm exterior. "Dante? Who is he?" He cut me off, leaning forward slightly. "The father. Is it that musician you were so fond of? Marco?" "No, it's not. Or perhaps one of the many men I'm sure you've been with since you walked out on our marriage." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Did you think I wouldn't find you eventually? Cara mia, did you think I had forgotten you?" A chill ran down my spine. The endearment sounded like a threat on his lips. "I didn't think you'd want to find me after what happened," I said quietly, placing my hands protectively over my stomach. His eyes followed the movement, and yet here you are, living in my city, working in a restaurant I frequent. He took another sip of wine, studying me over the rim of his glass. "Quite a coincidence, wouldn't you say?" "It's not what you think. I didn't know." "What I think," he interrupted, "is that my wife, yes, Elena, you are still legally my wife, abandoned our marriage, stole from me, and is now carrying another man's child while living in poverty." His voice remained eerily calm. "Do you deny any of this?" I swallowed hard. "I didn't steal from you." He laughed, a sound without humor. "No? The necklace I gave you on our wedding day, my grandmother's necklace, vanished along with you. 3 perfect emeralds, worth more than this restaurant. I didn't take it," I insisted, my hands clenching into fists beneath the table. "Check your safe. Check with Salvatore. I left everything behind." A flash of something, doubt, perhaps, crossed his features before his expression hardened again. "Salvatore has been dead for 4 years. Convenient that you would name him." My blood ran cold. Salvatore had been Dante's right-hand man, like an uncle to him since childhood. Dead? How? Betrayal has consequences, Elena. You should remember that. He glanced at my stomach again, and I instinctively placed my hand over it, as if I could shield my unborn child from his gaze. "How far along are you?" 5 months, I answered truthfully. Seeing no point in lying, he nodded slowly, calculating. "And who is the lucky man?" I met his gaze steadily, finding a shred of courage from somewhere deep inside. "No one you know." For a moment, I thought he might reach across the table and grab me, as he had sometimes done in the past when his temper flared. Instead, he pulled out his phone, typed something quickly, and slid it back into his pocket. "You look tired, Elena," he observed, his tone suddenly conversational. "How long have you been working here?" The abrupt change unsettled me more than his anger. 3 weeks. "And before that?" "I worked at a cafe downtown. Before that, a hotel in Riverside." He nodded, as if filing away this information. "Always running. Always looking over your shoulder." He leaned back, studying me with those penetrating eyes. "It must be exhausting, especially in your condition." I didn't respond. What could I say? He was right. The past 5 years had been a constant struggle, moving from city to city, taking whatever jobs I could find, always afraid that one day he would find me, and now he had. "Your shift ends at 11, he said. Not a question, but a statement of fact. He had already checked. "I'll have Marco waiting outside with the car." Panic surged through me. "I'm not going anywhere with you, Dante." "No?" He raised an eyebrow. "You prefer to take the bus back to that tiny apartment in the East District? The one with the broken lock on the front door and the drug dealer on the first floor?" My mouth went dry. He knew where I lived. How long had he been watching me? "You've made your life unnecessarily difficult," he continued, swirling the wine in his glass. "Whatever your reasons for leaving, they hardly justify living in squalor while carrying a child." "I made my choice," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "And now I'm making mine." His tone brooked no argument. "You will finish your shift, and then you will come with me. We have much to discuss, including your living arrangements going forward. I don't need your charity." His smile was cold. "Charity? Is that what you think this is?" He leaned forward again, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "Let me be clear, Elena. You are still my wife. That child you're carrying may not be mine, but as long as you bear my name, its welfare is my concern, and I will not have my wife living like a pauper, or working herself to exhaustion serving meals to people like me." The rest of my shift passed in a blur. I moved mechanically from table to table, taking orders, serving food, forcing smiles that never reached my eyes. All the while, I felt Dante's presence like a physical weight, even though he had left shortly after our conversation, leaving a tip that made Paolo's eyes widen. "Whatever history you have with Mr. Ricci," Paolo had whispered as I cleared the table, "it seems he's still generous where you're concerned." I'd said nothing, pocketing the money with trembling hands. I needed it, no matter how much I hated taking anything from Dante. The rent was due in 3 days, and my last doctor's appointment had depleted what little savings I had managed to scrape together. As 11 o'clock approached, dread pooled in my stomach. I could run, grab my purse from the staff room and slip out the back door. But what then? Dante had found me once. He would find me again, and next time, he might not be so cordial. The memory of our last night together flashed unbidden through my mind. The argument that had escalated beyond anything we'd experienced before. The look in his eyes when he'd discovered I'd been secretly taking birth control pills, thwarting his desire for an heir. The rage that had transformed his handsome face into something frightening, something inhuman. "You've betrayed me," he had snarled, hurling a crystal tumbler against the wall where it had shattered into 1,000 glittering pieces. "After everything I've given you, everything I've done for you." I had cowered in the corner of our bedroom, terrified not by the broken glass or his shouting, but by the cold, calculating fury that had followed. The quiet that had descended as he'd straightened his cuffs, looked at me with those dead eyes, and made a phone call. "Salvatore, bring the car around. We need to take care of something." That was when I knew I had to leave, not just the house, but him. His world, the gilded cage he had constructed around me from the moment he had swept into my life. And now, 5 years later, I was about to walk right back into his grasp. "Elena." Paolo's voice broke through my thoughts. "Your shift is over. There's a car waiting for you outside." I nodded, unable to speak past the knot in my throat. In the staff room, I changed slowly out of my uniform, my fingers fumbling with buttons and zippers. My reflection in the small mirror above the lockers showed a pale, drawn face, framed by dark hair, pulled back in a severe bun. I looked older than my 28 years, worn down by worry and hardship. I placed a hand on my rounded belly, feeling a reassuring kick from within. "It's going to be okay," I whispered, though I wasn't sure if I was trying to convince the baby or myself. Outside, the October air was crisp, carrying the first hint of winter. A sleek black SUV with tinted windows idled at the curb, its engine a low purr in the quiet street. As I approached, the rear door opened, and Marco, older now, with more gray in his beard but still as imposing as ever, stepped out. "Mrs. Ricci," he said, inclining his head slightly. The name, unheard for so long, sent a shiver down my spine. "Just Elena now, Marco." A ghost of a smile touched his weathered face. "As you wish. The boss is waiting." I hesitated, scanning the street as if looking for an escape route. Marco noticed, his expression softening fractionally. "He won't harm you, Elena," he said quietly. "Whatever happened between you two, he's not the kind of man who would hurt a pregnant woman." Small comfort, but it was all I had. I climbed into the back seat, where Dante sat reviewing something on his tablet, his face illuminated by its blue glow. He didn't look up as Marco closed the door and returned to the driver's seat. "Where are we going?" I asked, trying to keep the tremor from my voice as the car pulled away from the curb. Dante finally looked at me, his dark eyes unreadable in the dim light. "Home." The word hung between us, heavy with implications. I tensed. "I'm not going back to the estate, no," he agreed, surprising me. "That house has too many complicated memories for both of us." He returned his attention to his tablet. "I've arranged for you to stay at the penthouse downtown. It's closer to the hospital, should you need medical attention." The casual way he took control of my life, making decisions without consulting me, reignited some of the old resentment I had carried away from our marriage. "I have my own place. That rat-infested fire trap?" His tone was dismissive. "It's not suitable for you, let alone an infant. It's all I can afford," I said stiffly. "Some of us have to work for a living." A dangerous smile curved his lips. "Are you implying I don't work, Kara? Perhaps you've forgotten the hours I keep, the responsibilities I bear." I hadn't forgotten. How could I? The late-night phone calls, the unexpected visitors, the meetings that couldn't be discussed afterward. The blood I'd once found spattered across his shirt collar when he came home at dawn. No, I hadn't forgotten what kind of work Dante Ricci did. "You know what I mean," I said. "Normal jobs, honest jobs." His smile vanished. "And serving overpriced meals to rich criminals is your idea of honest work? Don't be naive, Elena. You were always better than that. Better? Or just more useful to you?" The words escaped before I could stop them. For a moment, something like hurt flashed across his face, quickly masked by cool indifference. "You were never just useful to me. If you believe that, then you understood nothing about our marriage." I turned away, watching the city lights blur past the window, unwilling to continue a conversation that would only lead us in circles. We had been down this road before, the accusations, the justifications, the fundamental disconnect between his worldview and mine. The car slowed, then turned into the underground parking of one of the city's most exclusive residential towers. I recognized it immediately, the Pinnacle, where penthouses sold for millions and security was tight enough to keep even the most determined paparazzi at bay. Perfect for someone like Dante, who valued privacy above all else. Marco pulled into a reserved space near a private elevator, then came around to open my door. As I stepped out, Dante placed his hand at the small of my back, a gesture so familiar it sent a jolt through my body. I stiffened but didn't pull away, too aware of the armed men standing discreetly by the elevator doors. The penthouse occupied the entire top floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city skyline. It was decorated in Dante's preferred style, minimalist, masculine, with subtle touches of luxury in the form of original artwork and custom furniture. Nothing like the ornate, old-world opulence of the estate where we had lived as husband and wife. "You've been here before," he observed, watching my reaction as I took in the space. I nodded. "Once, for that charity gala 3 months before I left. You wore blue," he said softly. "A dress that matched your eyes. Every man in the room wanted you, and you made sure they all knew I belonged to you," I replied, remembering how his hand had never left my waist, how his eyes had tracked every man who approached me. A faint smile touched his lips. "I did, didn't I?" He removed his suit jacket, draping it over the back of a chair. "Are you hungry? There's food in the kitchen." The abrupt change of subject was disorienting, but my stomach rumbled in response. I realized I hadn't eaten since that meager sandwich hours ago. "A little." He nodded toward the kitchen. "Help yourself. I need to make a few calls." I watched him walk away, phone already in hand, before making my way to the kitchen. It was state-of-the-art, all gleaming stainless steel and black marble, and completely spotless, clearly unused. The refrigerator, however, was fully stocked, as if someone had anticipated my arrival. Of course they had. Dante left nothing to chance. I made myself a simple sandwich, trying not to think about how much this domestic scene resembled our early days together, before I had fully understood what being Dante Ricci's wife truly meant. Before the possessiveness had become suffocating, the jealousy frightening, the control absolute. I was halfway through my meal when he returned. His tie loosened, a glass of amber liquid in his hand. "You should sit down," he said, gesturing to the living room. "We need to talk." I followed him reluctantly, taking a seat on the edge of the sofa while he settled into an armchair across from me. For a long moment, he just studied me, his gaze lingering on my rounded belly. "Who is the father?" he asked finally, his voice deceptively calm. I met his eyes steadily. "Does it matter?" "It matters to me." "Why?" "So you can have him eliminated? Add him to your list of business problems solved permanently?" The bitterness in my voice surprised even me. Dante's expression didn't change, but I saw his fingers tighten around his glass. "You always did have a melodramatic view of my work. Is it melodrama when it's true? When I've seen the consequences firsthand?" He took a slow sip of his drink. "What you saw was necessary. What you never understood was why." "Enlighten me, then," I challenged, old anger bubbling up. "Explain to me why your business requires intimidation, violence, and occasionally murder. The world operates on power, Elena. Always has. Always will. Some derive it from politics, some from wealth, some from fear. I use all three, as necessary." He leaned forward, his eyes intense. "But everything I did, every decision I made, was to protect what was mine, including you." "I wasn't yours to protect," I said quietly. "I wasn't a possession to be guarded and displayed." "No?" His smile was bitter. "Then what were you, Elena? My wife? My partner? You certainly weren't honest with me about what you wanted." The accusation stung because it contained a grain of truth. I hadn't been entirely honest. About the birth control, about my growing discomfort with his world, about my plans to leave. "I tried to talk to you," I said. "You wouldn't listen." "I listened. I just didn't hear what you wanted me to hear." He set his glass down with deliberate care. "You wanted children. You told me so when we were dating. Then suddenly, after the wedding, you changed your mind." "What was I supposed to think? That I had the right to choose when and if I became a mother?" I replied, my hand instinctively moving to my belly. "That my body wasn't just another piece of property for you to control." He flinched, almost imperceptibly. "Is that what you thought? That I viewed you as property? How else was I supposed to interpret the guards who followed me everywhere? The restrictions on who I could see, where I could go, the way you reacted whenever another man so much as looked at me. I was protecting you," he insisted. My position makes me a target, and by extension, it made you one too. Your possessiveness went far beyond protection, Dante, and you know it." He was silent for a moment, his eyes never leaving mine. Then, with a slight incline of his head, he conceded the point. "Perhaps, but my question remains unanswered. Who is the father of your child?" I sighed, suddenly exhausted. The events of the day, the shock of seeing Dante again, the confrontation, the uncertainty about my future, had drained what little energy I had left. "His name is David. He was a doctor at the hospital where I worked in Riverside. Was." I looked away. "He died. Car accident 3 months ago." Dante absorbed this information with an unreadable expression. "I'm sorry for your loss." The words sounded sincere, but I knew better than to trust the apparent sympathy. Dante Ricci never revealed his true thoughts unless it served his purpose. "What happened to Salvatore?" I asked, changing the subject. "You said he died. How?" A shadow crossed Dante's face. "Police raid gone wrong, or so it seemed at the time." "At the time?" He met my gaze, his eyes hardening. "Later, we discovered it wasn't as random as it appeared. Someone had tipped off the authorities about one of our storage facilities. Salvatore was caught in the crossfire." A chill ran through me. "And you think I had something to do with it?" "The timing was suspicious. You disappear, and 2 weeks later, Salvatore is dead in a raid that shouldn't have happened." He lifted his glass again, swirling the liquid thoughtfully, "But I've since learned who was really responsible. It wasn't you." Relief washed over me, followed immediately by indignation. "You suspected me of betraying you like that? Of causing Salvatore's death? You had already betrayed me in other ways," he pointed out coldly. "And the necklace was missing. What was I supposed to think? That maybe I wasn't the conniving, duplicitous bitch you apparently believed me to be?" I snapped, suddenly furious. "That maybe there was another explanation for both my leaving and the missing necklace. Such as the fact that I left it in the safe in our bedroom where it had always been kept. If it was gone, someone else took it after I left." Dante's expression changed subtly, a flicker of something, doubt, perhaps, or realization, crossing his features before his face settled back into its usual mask of control. "The bedroom safe," he repeated, as if testing the words. "Not the main vault downstairs." "Of course not. I never had access to the main vault." I watched him carefully, trying to read his thoughts. "You know that." He was silent for a long moment, his fingers tapping a slow rhythm against the arm of his chair. "The bedroom safe was emptied the day after you left, by Salvatore, on my orders." "And the necklace wasn't there?" I pressed, a knot forming in my stomach. "Salvatore reported that everything of value had been cleared out, as instructed. The necklace was never mentioned specifically." His eyes narrowed slightly. "Are you suggesting Salvatore lied to me?" I chose my words carefully, aware of the dangerous territory we were entering. "I'm suggesting that perhaps he didn't mention the necklace because he assumed you had already taken it. Or because he took it himself. Salvatore was loyal to me for 30 years, Dante said. But I could hear the first note of uncertainty in his voice. He was like family. Even family can betray you, Dante. The irony of my words wasn't lost on me. You of all people should know that. He stood abruptly, moving to the wall of windows that overlooked the glittering cityscape. With his back to me, shoulders rigid beneath his crisp white shirt, he seemed suddenly distant, lost in thought. If what you're saying is true, he said finally, then I've spent 5 years believing a lie, hunting for a thief who never existed. The implication sent a chill down my spine. Hunting? Is that what you've been doing? Searching for me all this time? He turned to face me, his expression unreadable in the half-light. Did you think I would simply let you go? That I would accept your disappearance without question? A bitter smile twisted his lips. You were my wife, Elena, the one person I trusted completely. And yet you believed I could steal from you, that I could betray you so callously. You did betray me, he countered, his voice hardening. Maybe not by taking the necklace, but by lying to me about wanting a family, by leaving without a word of explanation beyond a hastily written note. I felt a surge of old anger, of frustration at his inability, or unwillingness, to understand my perspective. I left you a 3-page letter explaining exactly why I was leaving. If all you found was a hastily written note, then someone intercepted my letter. Dante went very still, his eyes fixed on mine, with an intensity that made my heart race. What did this letter say? Everything, I said quietly. Why I couldn't stay. Why I had to leave the way I did, without saying goodbye in person. How terrified I was of what you had become. What I had become, he repeated, his voice dangerously soft. And what was that exactly? I met his gaze unflinchingly. A man who valued control over love, who confused possession with devotion, who wouldn't hesitate to destroy anyone who stood between him and what he wanted. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to continue. The night of our fight, when you called Salvatore to take care of something, I thought that something was me, or at least my disobedience. Shock flashed across his face, quickly replaced by a cold fury that made me shrink back against the sofa cushions. You thought I was going to have you killed? For taking birth control pills? He let out a harsh laugh, devoid of humor. My God, Elena, what kind of monster did you think I was? The kind who once had a man beaten half to death for merely flirting with me at a charity event, I shot back. The kind who threatened to erase my cousin when he suggested I wasn't happy in our marriage. Dante shook his head slowly, his eyes never leaving mine. I never threatened your cousin. And that man at the charity event wasn't just flirting. He was a rival from the Veronese family, using you to get to me. His beating was a message, not a jealous reaction. That's not how it seemed at the time, I said, though a seed of doubt had been planted. Had I misunderstood? Misinterpreted? And the phone call to Salvatore? Was about a shipment coming in that night that needed additional security. Not about you. He moved closer, stopping just in front of me, his presence overwhelming in the confined space. Elena, I have done many things I'm not proud of. I have hurt people, threatened people, even ordered deaths when necessary, but I would never, never harm you. The fact that you believed otherwise. He trailed off, pain evident in his voice despite his attempt to mask it. I looked up at him, suddenly uncertain. Had I misjudged him so completely? Had fear and misunderstanding driven me to flee from a danger that never existed? The letter, I said, refocusing on the concrete issue at hand. If you never received it, then someone intercepted it. Someone who wanted you to believe I had betrayed you more completely than I actually had. Dante's expression darkened as he considered this possibility. Someone with access to the house that night. Someone who knew about the necklace in the bedroom safe. Someone like Salvatore, I suggested cautiously. He didn't dismiss the idea outright, which told me he was taking it seriously. Instead, he moved back to his chair, picked up his abandoned drink, and drained it in one swallow. If Salvatore betrayed me, stole the necklace, intercepted your letter, lied about emptying the safe, then why? What was his motive? I don't know, I admitted. But if he died 2 weeks after I left, in what you now believe was a deliberately planned raid rather than an accident, then perhaps the two events are connected. Dante's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. Perhaps indeed. He set down his empty glass and leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Tell me more about this doctor, the father of your child. The abrupt change of subject caught me off guard. David? What about him? How did you meet? How long were you together? Was it serious? I bristled at the interrogation. Why does it matter now? He's gone. Humor me, Dante said, his tone making it clear it wasn't a request. I sighed, too tired to argue further. We met at the hospital in Riverside where I was working as an administrative assistant. He was kind to me when I first arrived, helped me find an apartment, introduced me to people. The memories brought a lump to my throat. We dated for about a year before I got pregnant. It wasn't planned, but we were happy about it. He proposed, I accepted, then the accident happened. And his family? Are they involved in your life? The baby's life? I shook my head. He was estranged from them, some kind of family business dispute years ago. A bitter laugh escaped me. Ironic, isn't it? I ran from one man with family business issues right into the arms of another. Dante didn't share my dark amusement. His expression had grown increasingly troubled as I spoke. What was his full name? This David. David Miller, I said, then frowned at Dante's reaction, a slight tensing of his jaw, a narrowing of his eyes. Why? Did you know him? Not personally, no. He stood again, restless energy radiating from him, but the name is familiar. A creeping unease settled in my stomach. Familiar how? That's what I intend to find out. He pulled out his phone, typed a brief message, then returned it to his pocket. In the meantime, it's late, and you need rest. There's a guest room prepared for you down the hall. The dismissal was clear, but I wasn't ready to end the conversation. Dante, if you know something about David, when I know something concrete, I'll tell you, he interrupted, his tone final. For now, all I have are suspicions that need verification. Suspicions about what? About David? About his accident? My voice rose with each question. Was it not an accident? Dante, please, if you know something... He moved to me then, closing the distance between us in 2 swift strides, and took my face in his hands. The gesture was both gentle and commanding, forcing me to look directly into his eyes. Elena, listen to me carefully. You're exhausted, emotional, and in no condition to process what may be difficult information. Get some rest. Tomorrow, when I've confirmed my suspicions one way or the other, we'll talk further. The warmth of his hands against my skin, the familiar scent of him so close, sent a confusing mix of emotions coursing through me. Fear, anger, and something deeper, more primal, that I didn't want to acknowledge. I need to know, I insisted, my voice barely above a whisper. His thumbs brushed gently across my cheekbones, an achingly familiar caress. And you will. I promise. But not tonight. He released me and stepped back, the momentary intimacy vanishing as quickly as it had appeared. The guest room is the second door on the right. There are clothes in the closet that should fit you, even with the baby. The kitchen is at your disposal if you get hungry during the night. It was surreal, this sudden shift to practical matters after the emotional intensity of our conversation. But perhaps it was for the best. I was exhausted, my mind foggy with fatigue and the lingering shock of the evening's events. Thank you, I said stiffly, rising to my feet with some difficulty. At 5 months pregnant, my balance wasn't what it used to be. Dante noticed my struggle but didn't offer help, knowing from experience that I valued my independence, especially in moments of vulnerability. It was a small courtesy that I appreciated more than I could express. Good night, Elena, he said, as I made my way toward the hallway. I paused at the threshold, looking back at him. In that moment, with the city lights behind him and shadows obscuring half his face, he looked both familiar and strange, the man I had once loved and the dangerous stranger I had fled from. Good night, Dante. The guest room was elegantly appointed, like everything in Dante's world, with a king-sized bed draped in luxurious linens, a marble ensuite bathroom, and a walk-in closet that, as promised, contained an array of clothing in my size, including maternity wear that still bore price tags, all newly purchased, all eerily perfect for my current needs. I tried not to think about the network of information Dante must have activated to arrange this so quickly after our chance encounter at the restaurant. I showered in the cavernous bathroom, letting the hot water sluice away some of the tension in my muscles. As I dried off, I caught sight of my reflection in the full-length mirror, my rounded belly, the subtle changes in my breasts and hips, the dark circles beneath my eyes that spoke of months of stress and poor sleep. A life growing inside me, a life connected to David, who may not have been who he claimed to be. A life that would now, inevitably, be touched by Dante's world in ways I had desperately tried to prevent. I slipped into a soft cotton nightgown I found in one of the drawers and climbed into bed, pulling the covers up to my chin despite the warmth of the room. Outside, the city hummed with nightlife. But here, high above it all in Dante's fortress of luxury, an unnatural silence prevailed. Sleep should have come easily after such an emotionally draining day, but instead, I found myself staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying fragments of my conversation with Dante. The revelation about the necklace, the intercepted letter, the hints about David that Dante had refused to elaborate on. What did it all mean? And how would these revelations change my precarious situation? I must have dozed off eventually because I woke with a start to the sound of voices in the living room, Dante's, deep and controlled, and another unfamiliar male voice. Glancing at the bedside clock, I saw it was just past 3 in the morning. Carefully, I slipped out of bed and padded to the door, opening it just enough to hear more clearly. Confirmed it was him, the unfamiliar voice was saying. The timeline matches, and the accident reports are suspicious at best. And the connection to the Veronese family? Dante asked. Still investigating, but preliminary evidence suggests he was on their payroll for at least 2 years before meeting your wife. My breath caught in my throat. They were talking about David, about connections to the Veronese family. Dante's primary business rivals, known for their brutality even among the criminal elite. Keep digging, Dante ordered. I want everything. Financial records, phone logs, known associates, and double the security detail on this building, effective immediately. Already done, boss. We've also got men watching her old apartment, in case anyone comes looking for her there. Good. That will be all for now. I heard footsteps retreating, then the sound of the front door closing. Moments later, Dante's voice came from directly outside my bedroom door, making me jump back in surprise. You might as well come out, Elena. I know you're listening. Caught. I pulled open the door to find Dante standing there, tie removed, shirt unbuttoned at the collar, a tumbler of what looked like whiskey in his hand. His eyes were tired but alert, studying me with an intensity that made me want to retreat back into the bedroom. How much did you hear? He asked, his voice low. Enough, I replied, wrapping my arms protectively around my middle. David was connected to the Veronese family? Is that what you're saying? Dante sighed, running a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of fatigue or frustration that I remembered from our marriage. Let's not do this in the hallway. Come. He turned and walked back toward the living room, clearly expecting me to follow. After a moment's hesitation, I did, the cool marble floor chilling my bare feet. In the living room, the city lights sparkled beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, a beautiful backdrop to the ugliness of our conversation. Dante gestured for me to sit, which I did, curling up in the corner of the sofa with a throw pillow clutched against my chest like a shield. David Miller, he began, pacing slowly before the windows, was not who he claimed to be. What does that mean? I demanded, fear and anger warring inside me. Just tell me, Dante. No more cryptic statements. He stopped pacing and faced me directly. It means that your David was working for the Veronese family. It means that your meeting was not a coincidence, nor was his interest in you. It means, he continued, his voice hardening, that you were targeted, Elena, because of your connection to me. The room seemed to tilt around me as the implications of his words sank in. No, I whispered, shaking my head. That's not possible. David didn't even know about you. I never told him I was married, let alone to whom. Are you certain about that? Did you never mention your past? Your ex-husband? Your maiden name? I frowned, thinking back. I told him I had been married before, yes, that it ended badly, but I never mentioned your name or your business. I had been careful about that, using my mother's maiden name when I'd started over. You didn't have to, Dante said, taking a seat across from me. The Veronese family has been trying to infiltrate my organization for years. They knew we were married. When you disappeared, they must have seen an opportunity. An opportunity for what? I asked, though part of me didn't want to know the answer. Information, leverage, revenge. He took a sip of his whiskey, his eyes never leaving mine. The specifics don't matter. What matters is that David Miller, if that was even his real name, was sent to find you, to get close to you, for the explicit purpose of using you against me. I felt sick. Memories of my relationship with David, his kindness, his attentiveness, his love, suddenly tainted by this new information. You're wrong, I insisted, but the conviction in my voice was wavering. David loved me. He wanted to marry me, to raise our child together. I'm sure he was very convincing, Dante said, not unkindly. Men like that are trained to be. Men like what? Spies? Infiltrators? I laughed bitterly. This isn't some spy movie, Dante. David was a doctor, a good man who conveniently appeared in your life shortly after you relocated to Riverside, who helped you find housing, introduced you to a social circle, made himself indispensable. Dante's tone was matter-of-fact, laying out the evidence piece by damning piece, a good man who proposed only after you became pregnant, ensuring a permanent connection. Stop it, I whispered, tears welling in my eyes. Just stop. But Dante pressed on, relentless in his dissection of my relationship with David. Did he ever introduce you to his family? His close friends from before you met? Did he ever share photographs from his childhood, his medical school days? Did he have a past that you could verify independently? Each question was like a knife, cutting away at the fabric of what I had believed was genuine love. David had been estranged from his family, he'd said, had few close friends due to his demanding schedule, had lost most of his personal belongings, including photographs, in a fire at his previous apartment. Convenient explanations, too convenient, now that I thought about them with Dante's suspicions in mind. His accident, I said suddenly, looking up at Dante with growing horror. You said the reports were suspicious. What did that mean? Was he... I couldn't bring myself to finish the question. Dante set down his glass, his expression grave. The evidence suggests it wasn't an accident at all. The brake lines in his car had been cut. Professionally done. Difficult to detect unless you know what to look for. He was murdered, I whispered, the reality of it settling over me like a shroud. But why? If he was working for the Veronese family, that's what I'm still trying to determine, Dante interrupted. It could have been that he'd served his purpose, or that he knew too much, or what? Dante hesitated. Something rare for him. Or that he had developed genuine feelings for you. That he was no longer a reliable asset for his employers. A sob escaped me before I could stop it. The implications too painful to process. Had David truly cared for me, only to be killed for that very reason? Or had our entire relationship been a lie? A sophisticated operation that had ended when it was no longer useful? And what of our baby? Had that been part of the plan too? A way to bind me to him permanently, to create leverage that could be used against Dante? I don't know what to believe anymore, I said, wiping away tears with the back of my hand. Everything I thought I knew. I understand the feeling, Dante said quietly. When you left, when I thought you had stolen from me and possibly betrayed me to my enemies, it shook everything I believed about us. I looked at him then, really looked at him for the first time since our reunion, beyond the power, the control, the dangerous edge that had always defined him. I saw something I had rarely glimpsed during our marriage, vulnerability. We've both been manipulated, I realized aloud. You by Salvatore, me by David, used as pawns in someone else's game. Dante nodded slowly, his expression hardening. The question now is, whose game? The Veronese family is the obvious answer, but something doesn't fit. The timing, the coordination required between Salvatore's betrayal and their placement of David in your path. You think there's someone else involved? A third party? Possibly. Someone with connections to both organizations. Someone who stood to benefit from turning us against each other. He rose abruptly, moving to the bar cart to refill his glass. Someone who may still be a threat, especially now that we've reconnected. Fear, cold and sharp, sliced through me. A threat to whom? Dante turned to face me, his expression deadly serious. To all of us. You, me, and your child. My hands instinctively moved to cradle my belly, protective of the innocent life within. Whatever games had been played, whatever lies had been told, my baby was blameless. What do we do? For now, you stay here, where I can ensure your safety, Dante said, his tone making it clear this wasn't negotiable. I have men investigating both Salvatore's death and David's accident, looking for connections. Once we know who we're dealing with, we can determine our next move. And if I don't want to stay here, I challenged, though without much conviction. The truth was, I had nowhere else to go that would be safe. Not if what Dante was saying proved true. He gave me a look that was half exasperation, half grudging respect for my continued defiance. Then I'll have Marco follow you with a security detail, which will be far more intrusive than simply staying in the penthouse. Your choice. It wasn't really a choice at all, and we both knew it. But Dante was at least maintaining the pretense that I had some agency in the matter, which was more consideration than he might have shown in the past. Fine, I conceded. I'll stay, but I have conditions. Dante raised an eyebrow, the ghost of a smile touching his lips. Of course you do. I want to keep working, I said firmly. Not at the restaurant. I understand that's not secure, but somewhere. I need my own money, my own purpose. That can be arranged, he agreed, surprising me with his quick acquiescence. What else? No guards following me inside the building. I won't live in a fishbowl. He frowned. Elena, the building has security, I pressed. Your men can watch the entrances, the elevators, whatever. But inside this apartment, I need space. Freedom to move without being observed constantly. Dante considered this for a moment, then nodded reluctantly. Acceptable, with one amendment. When you leave the building, you'll have a security detail. Non-negotiable. It was a reasonable compromise given the circumstances. Agreed. And one more thing. I took a deep breath, knowing this might be the hardest sell. I don't want your money. Not for me. Not for the baby. Now Dante's expression darkened. Don't be ridiculous. You're living in poverty when you don't have to be. And regardless of who the biological father is, as long as you're my wife, which, legally, you still are, I have a responsibility to you and your child. It's not about responsibility, I argued. It's about independence. I don't want to be dependent on you, Dante. Not financially, not emotionally, not in any way. Why? Because that worked out so well for you these past 5 years? He retorted, gesturing around the luxurious apartment. Living in squalor, working 2 jobs while pregnant, barely making ends meet? Because the price of your support has always been control, I shot back. And I won't pay that price again. Not for myself, and certainly not for my child. Dante went very still, his eyes never leaving mine. When he spoke, his voice was quiet but intense. Is that what you truly believe? That my support, my protection, my care for you was about control? Wasn't it? I challenged, memories flooding back. The guards who followed me everywhere, the friends he'd disapproved of and gradually removed from my life, the subtle ways he'd shaped my existence to fit his preferences. You monitored my every move, chose my friends, even tried to dictate when I would become a mother. I was protecting you, he insisted, an edge of frustration entering his voice. My world is dangerous, Elena. The people I deal with wouldn't hesitate to use you to get to me, as David proved. Protection doesn't have to mean possession, I said quietly. You never understood the difference. He set down his glass with deliberate care, then crossed the room to stand before me. Slowly, he lowered himself to one knee, bringing our faces level. The unexpected intimacy of the gesture made my breath catch. Perhaps I didn't, he admitted, his voice low and earnest. Perhaps I confused the two because the thought of losing you was unbearable. The raw honesty in his words, so unlike the calculated control he usually exerted, caught me off guard. I searched his face, looking for signs of manipulation or deception, but found only a vulnerability that mirrored my own. And now? I whispered. Now I understand that I did lose you. That my fear of losing you became a self-fulfilling prophecy. His gaze dropped to my rounded belly, then back to my face. I don't want to make the same mistake again, Elena. Stay here, let me protect you and your child, but on your terms, not mine. It was everything I had wanted to hear during our marriage, an acknowledgement of my autonomy, a promise to respect my boundaries. But was it sincere? Or just another tactic to keep me where he wanted me? Before I could respond, a sharp pain lanced through my abdomen, making me gasp and double over. Dante's expression instantly shifted from vulnerability to alarm. Elena, what's wrong? I pressed my hands to my stomach, trying to breathe through the pain. I don't know. It's another spasm cut off my words, stronger than the first. Dante was on his feet in an instant, phone in hand. I'm calling my doctor. Can you stand? I nodded, though I wasn't entirely sure. The pain was receding, but but had left a lingering ache that worried me. "I think so. It's probably nothing. Just stress." "We're not taking that chance," he said firmly, already speaking into the phone. "Dr. Rossi, yes, I know what time it is. I need you at the penthouse immediately. It's Elena. She's pregnant and experiencing abdominal pain." As he continued the conversation, moving away to give instructions to someone else. Marco, probably. I struggled to my feet, only to be hit by another wave of pain that made my knees buckle. Dante was at my side in an instant, catching me before I fell. "The doctor is on his way," he said, his voice betraying more emotion than I had heard in years. "And I've called for a helicopter to be ready if we need to get you to the hospital. Just hold on, cara mia. Hold on." As he lifted me effortlessly into his arms and carried me back to the bedroom, I found myself clinging to him, all thoughts of independence and boundaries temporarily forgotten in the face of this more immediate fear. Whatever complicated history lay between us, whatever mistakes we had both made, in this moment, Dante was the only solid thing in a world that seemed to be dissolving into pain and uncertainty. "Don't let anything happen to my baby," I whispered against his chest, tears streaming down my face. His arms tightened around me, his voice fierce with a promise that brooked no argument. "Nothing will happen to your child, Elena. I swear it on my life." The next few hours passed in a blur of pain, fear, and medical intervention. Dr. Rossi, a diminutive man with kind eyes and authoritative hands, arrived within 20 minutes of Dante's call. He examined me thoroughly, while Dante paced the bedroom like a caged panther, his expression oscillating between concern and barely contained rage. Not at me, but at the situation, at his inability to control what was happening. "Braxton Hicks contractions, doctor," Rossi announced finally, patting my hand reassuringly. "False labor, triggered by stress and exhaustion. Not uncommon at 5 months, especially for a woman in your complicated circumstances." The relief that flooded through me was so intense I nearly wept. "The baby is okay? The baby is fine," he confirmed, placing a stethoscope against my belly and inviting me to listen to the strong, steady heartbeat. "But you need rest, proper nutrition, and significantly less stress." He glanced meaningfully at Dante. "All of which I've been instructed to ensure you receive." Dante nodded, his face grim with determination. "Whatever she needs. For tonight, a sedative to help you sleep," Dr. Rossi said, preparing an injection. "Tomorrow we'll discuss a proper care regimen for the remainder of your pregnancy." I wanted to protest the sedative. I'd avoided all medication since discovering I was pregnant, but the memory of the pain and the lingering fear it had inspired silenced my objections. If Dr. Rossi said it was safe for the baby, I would trust him. As the sedative took effect, I drifted in and out of awareness. Dante and the doctor speaking in low voices at the foot of the bed, Dante making phone calls, issuing orders, his voice hard but controlled. And finally, Dante sitting in a chair beside the bed, his hand covering mine, his thumb tracing slow circles on my palm, a gesture so familiar from our marriage that it brought tears to my eyes, even in my sedated state. When I woke fully, sunlight was streaming through the partially open curtains, and Dante was still there, now reading something on his tablet, still holding my hand. He looked up immediately as I stirred, setting the tablet aside. "How are you feeling?" he asked, his voice rough with what I guessed was a night without sleep. "Better," I admitted, cautiously stretching. The pain was gone, replaced by a dull, manageable ache. "What time is it?" "Just past noon. You needed the rest." His eyes searched my face, looking for signs of discomfort or distress. "Are you hungry? Thirsty?" The solicitousness was both touching and disconcerting, a glimpse of the attentive husband he had sometimes been during our marriage, before possessiveness had overshadowed his better qualities. "Water would be good," I said, realizing my throat was dry. He reached for a glass on the nightstand, helping me sit up slightly to drink. His hand lingered at the small of my back, supportive but not controlling, and I found myself leaning into his touch despite my better judgment. "Thank you," I murmured as he set the glass down. "For everything last night, the doctor, staying with me." "You don't need to thank me for that," he said, his voice uncharacteristically gentle. It was the least I could do. An awkward silence fell between us, filled with unspoken questions and unresolved tensions. Finally, I broke it with the most pressing issue on my mind. The baby is really okay? Dr. Rossi confirmed it this morning before he left. The heartbeat is strong, and there are no signs of complications. Dante's expression softened fractionally. He said you've been taking good care of yourself, despite your difficult circumstances. It wasn't quite praise, but it was an acknowledgement of my efforts, which was more than I might have expected from the Dante I remembered. I've tried, I said simply. It hasn't been easy, but you managed without me, he finished, a complex emotion flickering across his features. You always were resourceful. Something in his tone made me study him more carefully. You sound almost proud. Perhaps I am. He leaned back in the chair, maintaining his gentle hold on my hand. Disappointed that you felt you had to leave, angry about the years lost. But yes, proud of your strength. I always was. Even when it frustrated me, this was new. This openness, this willingness to acknowledge my independence as something to be admired rather than controlled. It was a side of Dante I had glimpsed only rarely during our marriage, usually in the early hours of the morning when his guard was down, or in moments of crisis when masks slipped. What happens now? I asked, voicing the question that hung between us. Dante's expression turned serious. Now we keep you and the baby safe while my men continue their investigation. I have leads on the connection between Salvatore and the Veronese family and on David's real identity. And then what? Once you have the information you need? He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. That depends partly on what we discover. If there's an ongoing threat, it will need to be addressed. And it depends partly on you, on what you want. What I want. I repeated slowly. Since when has that factored into your calculations? A flash of hurt crossed his face before he could mask it. Perhaps I've learned a few things in the past 5 years, Elena. Loss has a way of clarifying priorities. I wanted to believe him. Part of me desperately wanted to believe that Dante had changed, that he had learned from the mistakes that had driven me away. But another part, the cautious, self-protective part that had kept me alive and independent these past 5 years, whispered warnings about trusting too easily, about falling back into old patterns. I need time, I said finally. Time to process everything that's happened. Everything we've learned about Salvatore, about David, about each other. Dante nodded, his expression guarded but not cold. Time you shall have. In the meantime, Doctor, Rossi has ordered bed rest for today and a follow-up appointment tomorrow. I've taken the liberty of contacting the restaurant to inform them you'll be taking a leave of absence. I bristled slightly at his presumption, then reminded myself that he was right. I couldn't return to waitressing, not after what had happened, not with the potential threat still looming. Still, the principle mattered. In the future, I'd appreciate being consulted about decisions that affect my life, I said, keeping my tone even but firm. To my surprise, Dante inclined his head in acknowledgement. Noted. It won't happen again without your input. Another step forward, another small concession to my autonomy. I found myself wondering if this new consideration was genuine or simply a tactic to regain my trust. With Dante, it had always been difficult to separate genuine emotion from strategic calculation. There's something else we need to discuss, he said, interrupting my thoughts. Something I discovered early this morning. The serious tone of his voice made me tense. What is it? The investigation into David's background revealed something unexpected. He paused, as if weighing how much to tell me. The DNA samples we obtained from his personal effects suggest that he may have been related to Antonio Veronese. Related? You mean he was family? Not just an employee? Dante nodded grimly. A nephew, we believe, which would explain his level of involvement in family operations, and the particular interest the Veronese family took in your situation. The implications hit me like a physical blow. Not only had David been working for Dante's enemies, he had been one of them, bound by blood to the very family that had been trying to destroy Dante's organization for generations. Did he know? I whispered, a new, horrible thought occurring to me. Did he know who I really was from the beginning? Was everything, every moment, every word, every touch, just part of the operation? Dante's expression softened with what appeared to be genuine sympathy. I don't know, Elena. It's possible he was simply following orders, targeting you based on your connection to me without knowing the specifics, or he knew exactly who I was and deliberately manipulated me. I finished, a wave of nausea washing over me that had nothing to do with my pregnancy. We may never know his true motivations, Dante said quietly. Men like that, men like me, learn to compartmentalize, to separate personal feelings from business necessities. It's possible he developed genuine feelings for you, even while carrying out his family's orders. Is it? I looked at him directly, searching his face for the truth. Could you do that? Use someone, manipulate them for business purposes, while genuinely caring for them? A shadow crossed his features. I've done many things in my life that I'm not proud of, Elena. But no, I could never have used you that way, not even at my worst. There were always lines I wouldn't cross, people I wouldn't sacrifice. His voice dropped to a near whisper. You were always one of those people, always. The raw honesty in his voice touched something deep inside me, a part that had never fully stopped loving him despite everything that had happened between us. But loving Dante and trusting him were two very different things, and trust was what had been broken beyond repair, or had it. The events of the past 24 hours had shaken everything I thought I knew, about David, about Salvatore, even about Dante himself. If I had been wrong about David, a man I had planned to marry, could I also have been wrong about Dante? Not entirely wrong, perhaps, but wrong in the ways that mattered most. I need to understand what really happened 5 years ago, I said slowly, not just Salvatore's betrayal or the missing necklace, but between us. What went wrong? Why I felt I had to leave. Dante was silent for a long moment, his dark eyes unreadable. I know what went wrong, he said finally. I loved you too much and trusted you too little. I tried to protect you by controlling you, not realizing that in doing so I was driving you away. The admission stunned me. It was more self-awareness, more accountability than I had ever expected from him. Why didn't you ever say this before? When it might have made a difference. Because I didn't understand it then. He replied simply. It took losing you to recognize my mistakes. And by then, it was too late. Tears pricked at my eyes, the weight of what might have been, what still might be, suddenly overwhelming. Is it still too late? I asked, the words escaping before I could reconsider them. Dante's hand tightened around mine. That depends on you, Elena, on whether you can forgive not just my past mistakes, but the man who made them, on whether you believe people, even people like me, can change. Can they? Can you? I have changed, he said, his voice low and intense. I'll never be a good man, Elena. I've done too much, seen too much to claim that title, but I can be better. For you, for your child, if you'll let me. My free hand moved instinctively to my belly, to the innocent life growing there, a life that would need protection in a world that had already proven more dangerous and deceitful than I had realized. The baby, I said hesitantly, even knowing it's not yours, even knowing who the father might have been, is innocent of its father's sins, Dante finished firmly. I would never punish a child for the circumstances of its birth, and if you allowed it, I would be honored to raise it as my own. The intensity of his declaration left me breathless. This was not the possessive, controlling Dante I had fled from 5 years ago. This was something different. A man tempered by loss, humbled by mistakes, offering not demands but choices. We can't just pick up where we left off, I warned, needing to be absolutely clear. Too much has happened. We're different people now. I'm not asking for that, he assured me. I'm asking for a chance to start again, to build something new, something better, something based on trust and respect, not control and fear. Could it work? Could we find our way back to each other after everything that had happened? Or more accurately, could we find our way forward to something neither of us had fully managed to create in our first attempt at marriage? One day at a time, I said finally. neither accepting nor rejecting his proposition. First, we deal with the immediate threats, finding out who was behind Salvatore's betrayal and David's deception, making sure the baby and I are safe. After that, we'll see. Dante nodded, understanding the caution in my response. One day at a time, he agreed, bringing my hand to his lips in a gesture that was both courtly and deeply intimate, starting today. And so we did. One day becoming 2, then a week, then a month. Dante's investigation eventually uncovered a complex conspiracy involving not just Salvatore and the Veronese family, but a third party who had played both sides against each other, a former associate of Dante's father, who had nursed a decades-old grudge and seen in me the perfect opportunity to destroy Dante from within. The threat was dealt with, though I deliberately avoided asking for details. There were still aspects of Dante's world that I preferred to keep at a distance, boundaries that he now respected without question. As my pregnancy progressed, Dante proved true to his word. He was protective but not possessive, attentive but not controlling. He consulted me on decisions, respected my need for space and independence, and never pushed for more than I was ready to give. And slowly, carefully, we began to rebuild what had been broken, not the gilded cage of our first marriage, but something stronger, healthier, built on a foundation of hard-earned trust and mutual respect. The day our daughter was born, a tiny, perfect being with a shock of dark hair and eyes that would eventually settle into a deep, thoughtful brown, Dante was beside me, his hand steady in mine, his eyes filled with a wonder I had never seen before. "She's beautiful," he whispered, carefully cradling her in arms that had once dealt death, but now held nothing but gentle protection. Like her mother. And as I watched them together, this powerful, dangerous man, and this innocent new life, I knew with absolute certainty that we had made the right choice, not to erase the past or pretend it hadn't happened, but to learn from it, to grow from it, to build something new from the broken pieces of what had come before. "What shall we call her?" Dante asked, looking up at me with an expression of such open vulnerability that it brought tears to my eyes. I had thought long and hard about this, wanting a name that acknowledged both her origins and her future. "Sophia," I said finally. "It means wisdom." Dante smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes and softened the hard lines of his face. "Sophia Ricci," he said, testing the name. "It's perfect." And it was perfect. As perfect as anything can be in our imperfect world. Not a fairy tale ending where all wounds are magically healed and all sins forgotten, but something real and honest and hard-won. A second chance that neither of us had expected, but both of us had earned through pain and loss, and ultimately, growth. As Dante placed our daughter back in my arms and sat beside us on the hospital bed, his arm protectively encircling us both, I realized that sometimes the most beautiful beginnings arise from the most painful endings. That sometimes you have to lose everything you thought you wanted to find what you truly need. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, what you need was there all along, just waiting for you both to become the people worthy of it. "Welcome to the world, Sophia," Dante murmured, pressing a kiss to our daughter's forehead. "Your family is a little complicated, a little broken, but I promise you this. You will always be loved, always be protected, always be cherished." As I leaned against his shoulder, exhausted but content, I added my own silent promise. That our daughter would grow up in a home filled with love, but not possession, protection, but not control, strength, but also gentleness. That she would inherit the best of both of us, and none of the mistakes that had almost destroyed us. And that promise, unlike so many others that had been broken along the way, was one I knew we would both keep.